about motherhood. 1 minute, you're mom of the year.
I love you, Mommy.
Then the next, not so much. From bath time to bullying, from potty training to puberty, parenting is full of challenges. But one thing is for certain, you are not alone. Welcome to Modern Mom Probs. I'm your host, author, mother, parenting expert, Tara Clark. Join me while we tackle today's modern mom problems. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so excited for you to be here. There's so many things we're going to talk about, in addition to how lovely you look in that green shirt. That is absolutely your color.
Thank you.
Love it.
Thank you. It's actually a dress, and I love the little ruffle detail on it. It was from the Kate Spade drop, which was at Target, and admittedly, I was awake at 2 a.m. shopping it, but I'm not mad because I got this dress because it definitely was sold out when the rest of the world was awake.
Yes, I'm not mad at that at all. I love that. Actually, just the other day, my mother and I were at Target looking at what could best be described as the remnants of that collab drop. And I was so sad because nothing was in my size. And I was like, I can't get this like extra small or triple XL. Like I don't know. I couldn't make it work. It made me sad, but it's okay. Maybe next time.
Pro tip for when Target does those drops, like 5 to 8 days after those drops, like if you really want something, go to Target every day because people will have gotten the stuff that's shipped and they're returning it. So like I bought this dress in 3 sizes because I didn't know what the fit was going to be like. So I returned the other 2, maybe 7 days after the drop. And I was like, this is going to make someone's day to find this dress a week after it happened. So yeah, look at those return bins about a week after. Okay. And a lot of times you can score.
You are the master. This, I now we're going on a tangent already before we even get started talking about the book, but you are like the master of not only like retail, but affiliates. How did you get into that? How did you excel in that area?
You know, it's interesting. My family would say that I loved a clearance rack when I was 13, 14. You know, I just was like, well, if I've got $50 to spend, why wouldn't I go look on the clearance rack so I can get 5 things instead of 2 things, you know? So I do think that I like learned at a young age about like how to find a deal, what to look for, how low things would go. My parents actually met at Target in the 70s, and my mom is one of like the longest employees in Target's history. She's been there like 45 years, I think. And so I grew up in retail. I grew up with Target. So I kind of joke that I'm like an OG Target influencer because it's literally in my blood, you know? My mom was pregnant with me working at Target. And so, I think that's how it, like my retail mind, I think, started. And then when I started blogging in 2006, I'm like an OG mom blogger. I didn't really know anything at first. And I remember going to a conference and talking to deal bloggers at the time and them telling me that you could make money online. I was like, how do you do this? And I really just became self-taught in that. And now it's so interesting because affiliate links are such a huge income vertical for creators, but it's something I think I was doing well before most were doing it.
I see you as the queen of it. There's no one, in my opinion, just my opinion, that like can even hold a candle to you in terms of affiliates.
That's very kind. Well, it's really important to me. My handle's Jessica N. Turner, and people will often say they came for the deals and they stayed for the story. So it's kind of funny that we're starting here talking about deals, but we're going to talk about my story because I really think that so many people are just looking for help. And so I also say I help busy women with decision fatigue make decisions. And it's sometimes decisions like, what socks should I buy? You know, like just the very basic, and that people have really learned that they can trust me. And so I only recommend things that I absolutely love and use, but also, you know, when you click on that link and buy it, you know, I make a small little commission that really adds up. And I just feel so grateful that sharing things that I love can actually support my family at the same time.
It's incredible. And you gave me the most perfect segue to talking about the book. I have it right here. I thought it would be better than this. It is gorgeous. I'll describe it for the people that aren't looking at the video right now. It has a rose, and the rose is cut in several different ways. And then there's like Scotch tape that's trying to like put it back together. Let's dive in to your story.
Yeah. Well, I wrote the book. I thought it would be better than this. And it's probably important for people who can't see the cover to say the subtitle, which is Rise from Disappointment, Regain Control, and Rebuild a Life You Love. And in 2019, I found out that my husband of 16 years was gay. And we have 3 children. We're best friends. And it just, as you can imagine, completely shattered my whole world. And we went through a period of time. He first told me he was bi in spring of 2019, then told me he was gay in the fall. And obviously, I'm making this very hard story very brief.
You don't have to. We have time.
We grappled for a while with, could we have a mixed orientation marriage, which is a marriage where people have, 2 different sexual orientations. Some people will interpret that as like, oh, you were considering an open marriage. That is not what we were considering. We were just considering staying married. Matthew, I have come to understand Matthew isn't attracted to women, but he was attracted to me. He did love me. If I could be the only woman that he loved, could that be enough? And we really just circled the drain for months. And then we were planning on separating, and he was going to move out in March of 2020, which you might remember was the month the world shut down. Mm-hmm. And so he thankfully had not signed that lease on that apartment that he had looked at. And we decided to stay in the same house. And even at that point, I fought so hard for my marriage. I really did not want to get divorced. And it was not feasible. And so in June of 2020, we made the best imperfect choice, which we can talk more about that phrase, to get divorced, for Matthew to move out. He moved out into a house that was just down the street from mine. We live literally 90 seconds from one another. And he has a public platform as well and is a prolific children's book author. And we announced our divorce publicly in July of 2020. And there was a period of time where, of course, Matthew was celebrated for coming out. And I felt like I needed to stay very quiet to my pain, because it felt difficult for me publicly to hold those 2 things of celebrating this truth for him while also honoring the deep, deep grief that I had. In not knowing this truth and what happened with our family and being alone and starting over in my late 30s. And so it took me a while before I slowly started kind of tiptoeing into sharing some of those griefs publicly. And I was going through therapy all through this process, and eventually came to a place where I felt, other people have their own this. For me, I thought it would be better than this. I thought marriage would be better than this. I thought my life as I was turning 40 was going to be better than this. But everyone has something. Everyone listening today has something in their story that they thought would be better. They thought their career would be better. They thought their marriage situation as it is now would be better. They thought parenting would be better. They thought their health would be better. They thought the relationship with their extended family would be better. Whatever the thing is, my book helps you name that, acknowledge that grief, and then take steps forward to still create a beautiful life. And I can say now, 5-6 years later, that I'm really on the other side of that. And it's so beautiful. And I realize for some people, they're like, I've been dealing with this for 10 years. Like, it must be nice to be done at 5 years, to be on the other side. There is no timeline for grief. There are still moments when I get sad. There's still moments where I think, man, I thought it would be better than this, but they are few and far between compared to what they were. And I feel really grateful to get to be on the side and get to be encouraging other women in their stories.
And we appreciate that. How did the kids take it when Matthew broke the news?
They were little. So my youngest was going to be entering kindergarten in fall of 2020. And then my oldest, they're 6.5 years apart. So he was in 5th grade going into 6th grade. And then my daughter was in 3rd. And I remember my daughter saying, Daddy, if you were gay, why did you marry mommy? And it's just like out of the mouths of babes, right? I was like, well, Adeline, I've been asking that same question.
You're like, now I don't have to ask it.
Yeah. And he said, well, Adeline, because I fell in love with your mommy. And I think it's important to remember that when kids ask us questions, we only need to answer the question. We don't need to pontificate. We don't need to give them more than they need or can handle in that moment. And so that was enough for her then. And they continued to ask questions. My youngest really did not understand because we were still, good friends. We still would share meals together. We explained to them that we were just going to be a family with two roofs over our heads. And it just took time, just like it took time for me. I think in our particular situation, it was good that I had a prolonged period of processing prior to telling the kids. We also made sure on the day that we told them that we had something fun planned. So Matthew came out to them and we told them we were getting divorced all at the same time. And he moved out a week later. Like that whole timeline was fast, probably from their perspective, but we felt like it was necessary. And they didn't need to see us like staying in the same room and, and we were ready at that point. So we had everything ready. And we just gave it time. We just slowly answered their questions. And when we started dating, we had a conversation with them together about that we were going to start dating. Matthew and I are both in relationships right now. And I've been with my partner for over a year. And so the kids have, obviously by now spent a lot of time with him and whatnot. And Matthew's in a relationship. And this partner is the first partner that the kids have met. So I also am grateful that it was a long, slow period of them kind of getting used to the idea of dad being gay and our parents being divorced before, they entered into, seeing their parents with other people. And I think all of those things have been helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think time definitely helps with that. And with the pandemic, I mean, you were all together in the house.
Right.
With this
and
news.
Then, right. And so then when Matthew moved out right after, we were still in the pandemic. So he was still like one of the only people in my bubble, So we, in some ways, we almost, thank goodness we remained friends, and could do life together, because I do think that made it easier in some ways. It made it harder in some ways, though, in retrospect, right? Because we were still together often. And so what is this?
It probably stung a little bit, right? I would imagine it would sting, or the what ifs, would sting, the thinking about the future, all of that.
Right. I mean, there was just a lot of therapy during that time as we navigated and recognized what we needed, what we didn't need. So in that respect, Matthew and I were both really good of honoring what we needed during that period. And I'm really thankful that I had incredible community around me as well. I think my friends really saved my life during that period. We don't live in a city where our family lives. So it really was friends who were filling those gaps for us.
Yeah, you're lucky to have such a wonderful group of friends in person nearby to take care of that. I was going to ask, in the book, obviously, you share the story and then you talk about moving on and you talk about assessing your life and then looking at the pieces and then saying, how can I rebuild what I have now into a life that I love, a life that I'm happy, a life that I feel content? So I want to explore that a little bit too.
Yeah, well, I think that it is important to acknowledge that when we have any sort of grief, it isn't just like a 5-step plan and then the grief is gone and we never grapple with it again.
Right.
I use the analogy of scarring, and I had a hysterectomy a few years ago and I lost my uterus and my right ovary, and I was having a lot of pain on my right side. I should also note that a few years after that, I had an appendectomy on that side. And so I have nothing over on my right side of my body. Like nothing's left.
It's empty over there.
It's empty over there. And I was having all this pain. And so I went to my pelvic pain specialist and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I have all of this pain here. And she said, has this been a stressful season for you? And I said, well, actually, I've been writing this book right now that's recounting all the trauma that I lived through for the past few years. And she said, oftentimes our scars can ache when we're stressed or have pain. Wow. And I thought, wow, isn't that true of life as well? That there are times when even though we are healed, even though most days were fine, all of a sudden something aches a little bit. We remember, we see something just feels right off in our bodies. It's that idea of the body keeps the score, and so even though I've gone through so much healing, I also make space for when things are still painful. I tell this story in the book. It's one of my favorite stories. When I was remodeling my house after my divorce, I stayed in the house that Matthew and I had. And I did a lot of remodeling, though, when he left. And I was remodeling my kitchen and dining room. And my dining room was this beautiful room that had can lights in it that we could dim. It was beautiful for dinner parties. And there was crown molding around the ceiling. And when the contractor removed the crown molding, the wiring for those lights was stapled to the wall, which I don't know a lot about wiring, but I'm fairly certain it's not supposed to be stapled to the outside of your wall. And the contractor said, "You're really lucky. That could have started a fire." And just like that moment when I was in my doctor's office, I was like, wow, something can appear to be working. It can be beautiful. The lights can be on. And yet just below the surface, there's something not tended to that can be a fire hazard. And so a lot of the work that I've done and what I talk about in the book is noticing where those parts of your story are that need to be rewired. They're maybe fine, but could there be catastrophe at some point? Could there be a fire? Could something worse happen? And so I think that is another important acknowledgement in this, is that we can't just tend to the immediate stuff. I couldn't just tend to, I'm getting divorced, my husband is gay, and those things. But like, what was the root of some of what I was feeling? Like, why did I feel unworthy? Why did I feel like I wouldn't be desired again? Why did I feel like I wasn't enough? Like what was the root cause of this? Because if I didn't acknowledge that, things could look fine on the outside, but there could still be a fire hazard. And what I have found in talking with women is that we all have that. Everybody has those things that we need to really get at the root of it, down to the studs and the wiring and rewire those things in our own story.
Yeah, that's one of the best analogies for going deeper that I think I've probably ever heard. The stapling of the wires. Yeah, of course. And trust me, I see a lot of analogies and I read a lot of books, and that is probably like stands as one of like the clearest analogies. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. It's so logical. Makes sense.
I will say that John is my boyfriend's name, and I'll say that to him sometimes. I'll say, hey, this is something I think that I'm still working on rewiring. It's just become part of my vernacular to understand and to give myself grace and patience in my journey, that like not everything is fine just because I have healed in so many ways. I think I have a lot of work really around like my body image and worthiness and stuff that I'll just like, why am I feeling that way? What wire still hasn't gotten beneath the drywall yet that still needs some work on? So that's kind of been a gentle way of saying, oh, this is something I still need to work on.
Yeah, but at least you're checking those feelings. That's the most important thing. You're catching them and you're checking them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
As opposed to letting them just run rampant.
Right. And I think that's been one of the greatest gifts, and something that's been hard in this journey at the same time, is that I've become so much more self-aware of myself, of what I need, of what I don't want. I'm constantly feeling things in my body of like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Oh, why am I noticing this, and paying attention to it instead of ignoring it? I think our body is so gentle and wants to keep us safe and honor all that we are and what we've gone through, but we need to listen to her. And I think particularly for women, it can sometimes be difficult to do that.
Yeah, it is. I think we so often put ourselves last, and whether it's health issues or mental health issues or physically just going for a run around the block or taking a walk, right? We're always putting everyone else's needs ahead of ours and sort of like quelling our body's messages to us.
That's right. Yeah. It is that oxygen mask philosophy, right? That you have to put your oxygen mask on before you can put on everyone else's. And that feels sometimes difficult to believe, that like, oh, if a plane is crashing, I'm going to put my oxygen mask on before my child's. But giving your child the best chance of survival is doing that thing. And the same is true in life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When you first, even let's say before you met John, when you were sort of in the throes of everything, I could imagine, and now obviously I read the book, but I could also imagine what you were thinking of. Matthew doesn't love me. No one's going to love me. How did I let this happen? How did this come to this? Am I unworthy of love? And how did you work through that to be like, yeah, you're freaking amazing, Jess. Like, you are amazing. You are worthy of love in every facet of what that means. And how did you work through that and then say, okay, now I'm ready to put myself out there, hopefully meet another partner, move on with my life? Like, how did you work through those feelings of inadequacy?
That could be a whole podcast. I don't think that it was any one thing. I think an important distinction in my particular story is worthiness. I think is such a buzzword right now. I talk about worthiness in the book, but I think for me, I felt that I wasn't enough. So because Matthew and I went through that period of like, could we do a mixed orientation marriage? It was like who I was not enough for him, which looking back, I can, we could make jokes about it, but like, I didn't have the parts. Right. So it really wasn't anything specific about my character, who I was as a woman or who I was as a marriage partner. But it was the idea of enoughness, and enoughness has been a struggle for me. But then I've talked about this before with friends. I don't know if I've talked about it much on podcasts, but it's interesting how like you can go for years in your marriage with not a lot of intimacy. And I think there's a lot of us out there who don't have gay partners who just don't have a lot of intimacy in their marriage. And you think, oh, it's because we've been married for a long time. It's because we have kids. It's because we're tired. It's this or that. But a narrative that I created in my head was that it was my body, that my body had changed from kids, and that I'm not going to cry on this podcast, but that it had something to do with my body not being enough. And so then when my husband came out and I could very clearly see, oh, it wasn't my body. It was just that he was gay, right? Like this is you guys listening are like, right, duh, like it wasn't. But when you believe something for so long, right? Like when you believe something for so long, even when you finally get the fact of what actually is true, it's difficult to immediately let go of that and be like, oh, no, I'm actually like totally hot. And like, of course, guys are going to want me, right? Like, at least for me, that was not something I could quickly go to. So that was a lot of the work that I had to do around seeing myself as desirable, as, someone that a partner would desire in an intimate way. And frankly, after doing a lot of like therapeutic work around that and kind of getting more clarity around some of those root issues or that wiring, so to speak, I finally started dating. And then it was very easy to see, oh, heteronormative men are very different than the man that I was with. But again, I had no basis for that. I met Matthew when I was 20. I had done very little dating in college. He was all I knew. And so it actually was, there's a type of therapy where you actually physically go through exercises called somatic therapy. And my therapist recently said to me, actually, you being in a relationship sort of is like that for you. Like it actually is doing that work for you of helping you know the truth of being wanted and desired and things that most people listening probably have experienced that I did not experience in the way that I have now when I was in my marriage, but I just didn't know any different. Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you and Matthew have been together since you were little kids. I say little kids, maybe not actually little kids,
half
but
my
20
life.
years,
right.
Half your life. And that even take intimacy out of that, right? Like as a separate thing. But to have that person who was your best friend, who you bought a house with, who you had a family with, but not even that, who you shared inside jokes with.
That's right.
You have to grieve that as a loss too. Like I said, yes, I understand about it being a husband and intimacy and that relationship, but there's the other almost like more platonic part of your relationship.
Which
that
actually is a much bigger part, right?
Yeah.
A much bigger part. And so it really did feel like I was looking out at a battlefield where there was just death and destruction as far as you can see, like those war movies you watch, right? Like that's what my life felt like. I actually wrote a eulogy for my marriage and talk about having a funeral for something that you lose, because that act of grieving all of those things really mattered and was really helpful for me. And I think it's also making space to acknowledge all of those things. You know, if I thought it would be better than this is just relationships or it's parenting, like we don't really ever sit with those things. I think that we just kind of cast them aside or it's a fleeting thought. But when you sit with it and you acknowledge the magnitude of all that you're grieving, it really forces you to pause and say, this isn't a small thing. This is a really big thing. But just because this doesn't look the way I wanted it to doesn't mean I still can't create beauty, that it's not like your life is over. It's just different, and different can still be beautiful.
Yes. And you've made your life beautiful. You have a relationship with Matthew, like a platonic friendship relationship with Matthew, co-parenting the children together. You now are each dating individuals. So you are creating the life that you want, a new life.
That's right. Yeah. A life that we have now, that
it's the life you have now. It may not have been what you had chosen it to be if you would have asked 7 years ago, but it's
right
where we're at now.
What is such a marvel to me is how many women reach out to me and they see that Matthew and I will do a holiday together, or we will go on a trip with our kids together. And they're like, I would have given anything for my parents to be that way. I'm an adult and I wish that my divorced parents would be that way. And so I think about it really through the lens of my kids, and that while they have a grief in their story, they did not want for their parents to be divorced. They thought it would be better than this. They have to live in 2 houses and do all that comes with that. What I can still give them is a positive relationship with their dad. I can still give them memories on holidays with both parents, and that can still be a beautiful story for them, even if it's not the story that they would have chosen. And so I think that's just one example of how we have done that.
It's so beautiful. Giving your children the opportunity to share the holidays together, celebrate the holidays together is just beautiful. I follow it along on social media, and I'm always like, yes, like I see that as such a huge win. I really do.
Yeah. And I hope that someday, as they look back, they will be grateful and they will see the sacrifice that was involved with that. And, it will help them in their stories, whatever griefs they go through, that they will have bared witness to ours in the way we navigated it.
Yeah. And going through a situation like this, through the grief like this, you've given your children tools to help them, for them to help themselves even as they get older as well.
Absolutely. I had never done therapy prior to going through this experience, and all of my kids have met with therapists, and I hope that will eliminate some of the, friction and misinformation that I had around therapy growing up. I hope that they, see their parents as people who are whole and multidimensional. I have never been one that was like, oh, if my kids are around, I'm not going to go to book club, or I'm not going to work out, or I'm not going to do these things that I'm passionate about. But they've seen me make space for those things as well. And I think that will serve them really well. So I hope that we're modeling a lot of healthy behaviors, even though there has been some traumatic experiences and some sadness in our family story.
Yeah. What advice would you give to a woman in a similar situation, or a situation where she's saying to herself, I really thought it would be better than this?
I think I would say, number 1, if you haven't read my book, you should. And number 2, I would say, tell me more about that this. Let's unpack that, because I think naming the this and naming the adjacent things around that is empowering and gives you information. And when you have information, then you can make choices for what's best next in your story. There's an illustration in the book of a bike wheel where you write your this kind of in the center of those spokes. And then all of those spokes are the adjacent things related to that major this in your story. And I think it's a really powerful exercise and one that we all should do. And after the person has named their this, I would say, okay, who are 3 safe people that you can share this with? One, I would encourage to be a therapist, but who are 2 other people who can carry this? A lot of people are surprised that we did not involve our family in this journey until Matthew was ready to come out. So at the same time, we told our kids, we told our families. I think I maybe told my family a couple of days before. And the reason why we did that is because we knew that if we told our families, we were now going to have to carry their grief as well. And frankly, we didn't feel strong enough to do that. We were barely hanging on. We didn't want to have all the questions and all the uncertainty from an extended group of people. And so we kept it very small. Who were friends that we could trust this with that wouldn't be a burden once they knew? And I think that was one of the wisest things we did. It's interesting. My family has been listening to the book, and my dad reached out to me and he said, I never really understood why you chose to go about your divorce in the way you did. And what he meant was why you didn't tell us. And he said, but after listening to your book, I have a much better understanding. And I'm really sorry that you went through that without us. And, you know, he's in his 60s. And I think we can learn and grow at any age. And that was something really tender for him to listen to that book and then to reach out to me. And I'm really grateful for that, because they could have been really angry about it, but instead they were really gentle about it. And so figure out who can be that safe place for you to land.
Yeah, it's such good advice. And I relate to what you're saying there about the parenting and the way that you worded it, saying that you aren't strong enough to carry their grief as well. It's just mwah, chef's kiss on how you worded that. It really resonated with me. I'm going to ask you a question that I ask all of my guests, and I'm really curious to see what you're going to say, Jess. Are you ready?
I'm nervous. I don't know if I'm ready.
No, don't be. It's an easy one. What do you think is the biggest modern mom problem right now?
I think the biggest modern mom problem right now is mental load. And it's interesting because that's such a buzz term right now. I actually wrote about mental load in my previous book, Stretched Too Thin, How Working Moms Can Lose the Guilt, Work Smarter, and Thrive. And that book came out 7 years ago. So I wrote about mental load 8 years ago. And so many women who read that book said that that book gave them language that they didn't have around mental load. And now everyone's talking about, I feel like I've been talking about this for almost a decade, but the idea that women carry the bulk of noticing and remembering in their homes, that they're the ones that are scheduling the appointments, buying the food, buying the groceries, buying the underwear, planning the vacations, booking the summer camps, like all of the things, I think is one of the most impactful positive and negative experiences on a family, right? Mm-hmm. My son, Easter was a few weeks ago, and my youngest is 10, and he's been asking a lot of questions around the Easter bunny. And Matthew, and my oldest, who's almost 17, was like, Mom, we have to tell him. Like, he knows. We have to tell him. And I was like, it is Easter, guys. Like, we're not telling him on Easter. Like, can we just have this moment? Like, maybe we could tell him this summer. Well, a couple hours after we had done the Easter baskets, my 10-year-old comes up to me and he's like, asking a lot of questions around the Easter Bunny. Can I see his contact information in your phone? And I said, no, you can't, because, I have it programmed as a secret name. It doesn't say Easter Bunny, because then you would know. But if I told you the name, then you could look it up in my phone. He's like, this doesn't make any sense. And I said, Ezra, what are you asking, Mama? And he said, are you the Easter Bunny? And he's my baby, right? Like this is like the end of this thing. And I said, I am. And he looked at me and his eyes were sparkling. There was no sadness. And he hugged me. And we were sitting on the couch. So he just like leaned over and hugged me. And he said, you're the best Easter Bunny. And it just like made me want to sob. And then he said, at least we still have Santa. Santa's real. And I was like, yes, I still get Santa. I think he's really holding on to, like, he wants that magic to be, he doesn't want the whole thing to be done. But yeah. I share that story in the context of mental load because he was right. Like, Matthew is not the Easter Bunny. I am the Easter Bunny, right? Like that, all of that magic is load that I'm carrying. And there's so much of that we moms are doing. And I think that it is beautiful to have moments like I had with Ezra, and to be the magic maker in a lot of ways. And it is incredibly difficult as well.
Yeah, both things are true. When we told my son about all of the magical creatures, he I don't know if they're creatures, magical beings. I don't know what I would call them.
Both.
They're both. It all happened in one fell swoop because it was the day after Christmas not this past Christmas, but the previous Christmas. Mm-hmm. It was literally the day after. And then he found out. And then in that conversation, he found out about all of them. Yes. And he was devastated. Yeah. And he was the one that asked point blank. And so I wasn't going to lie. And so then I explained it. And he was so upset that the magic was gone. But now fast forward to all of the other subsequent holidays, including this past Easter, that I don't have to make the magic like that anymore. And it's very freeing. I think
right.
No, it is. Like
the mental load is different, right?
It's different now. It's different. Right. I didn't even bother to take the Easter baskets out of the closet. And it only occurred to me now that we're talking about this that I was like, oh, I didn't even take them out of the closet. I bought him a Nerf gun for Easter because that's what he asked for. And it was in my closet, and he went into my closet and he picked it up, and I was like, do you want me to wrap it? And he's like, nah, you don't have to wrap it. And I was like, all right, there you go. Go ahead, take it.
That's amazing.
That was it. But think about that one quick example of not having to take the Easter baskets out of the closet, buy the candy for them, fill them, leave them out. Yes, let's say I went to the store and got a Nerf gun, wrapped the Nerf gun, put a card on it, put it by, on the table, I guess, with the other Easter baskets, and have it be a whole thing. Like that, but in and of itself is probably 15 different steps.
That's right.
And now it was just like,
and then
okay,
we
here
multiply that times 100 things like that a day. I mean, I've had on my list so many things that have been like weeks of the same thing rattling around in my head. And I'm like, I just haven't been able to take 5 minutes to do that thing, right? Times 100. Yeah. I think it's even more so when you don't have a partner. Because even though when I was married and I was doing the bulk of the magic, I still had somebody else that I could talk to about it, that could help me with some of the decisions, who could take some of those. So I feel like I've become even more acutely aware of it since getting divorced. I've also become acutely aware of the goodness of men who notice it. And who are really good partners in that way. And Matthew is a great partner in a lot of ways, but it is not true for all men. I'll just say that.
That is absolutely true. No, that is unequivocally true. I was going to have another point on that, and I don't remember what I was going to say about I want to talk a little bit about your first book, though, too, because I didn't even realize that was 7 years ago. Time goes by so quickly.
Isn't that wild? My first book was 10 years ago, The Fringe Hours, which I released that 6 weeks after my son Ezra was born. So I joke that I gave birth twice in 6 weeks. And then my second book was Stretched Too Thin 7 years ago. So it has been a long time since I have released a book. I joke, but it's true. Book writing is my least favorite part of my job, which is good. Work is not supposed to have only things that you enjoy. And my degree is in journalism. I don't dislike writing, but the process of writing a book is so draining and so long and just its own beast that it will be at least probably another 5 to 7 years before I do this again, I think.
Yeah. Do you think you have another topic in you? Because your topics obviously are so different. I mean, they still fall underneath the umbrella of parenting and motherhood and women empowerment, if you will. But what do you think your next topic would be?
I don't know. So the Fringe Hours, my first book was around self-care for women, and it was answering the question that my community was always asking me, which is, how do you do it all? And the answer was, I don't do it all, but in these pockets of time that often go underused or wasted, I harness them to do the things that I love. And I called it the Fringe Hours. And then my second book, Stretched Too Thin, was also answering a question and a pain point for my community, right? Of being overwhelmed and exhausted. At that time, I worked in corporate America in addition to blogging. And so again, I was trying to serve women in an area that they were experiencing difficulty in. And so this feels like the appropriate next iteration of that and frankly, a deeper one. So, right, like, how do we make time for ourselves feels kind of low there. And then, no, we're carrying this mental load, this like tension kind of in many areas of our life, to now this bigger philosophical idea of, I thought it would be better than this. Like, this is not actually the life that I wanted. I've considered that perhaps my next book might be like an essays format of things that I've learned and experiences that I've had, a bit more memoir than self-help. I think I need to live a little more life before I do that, but I like the idea of writing essays. And I think what has resonated with so many people with, I thought it would be better than this, is that it straddles both self-help and memoir. It's both. It has really beautiful, vulnerable stories in it, and it gives you a lot of things that you can grab onto. And I like to think that that's how I live, how I show up on the internet is a blend of both of those things. So it feels really true to myself. But I wonder if the next book for me will be more just writing stories and memoir-ish. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, we're going to have to find out.
Yeah.
Who knows what your life has in store for you in the next 5 to 7 years? Could be anything.
It could be anything, right? I did not
7 years
imagine
ago,
this.
you didn't know you had this. So.
I didn't. Yeah, nothing. I knew nothing 7 years ago. That's right.
So who knew? So tell everyone, where can we buy this beautiful book? It is so beautifully written. As you're telling your story, I feel like I'm there with you. I'm sitting on the couch, curled up in a ball with you and Matthew together. You just are such a talented writer. Tell everyone where we can find it.
Thank you. So you can find I Thought It Would Be Better Than This at any major retailer online, Target, Amazon, your local indie bookstore. You can call and they can order it for you if they don't have it on the shelves. Please do that. If you aren't a book buyer, you can check it out at your library. If your library doesn't have it, you can request a book for free at your library and they will order it, which is amazing. If you're an audiobook listener, I read the book. So if you've enjoyed listening to me for this bit of time, you might enjoy the audiobook. What's really special about the audiobook is there's a 20-minute conversation with my best friend of 20 years. And we've both had some really painful experiences in our journey. Her daughter was given a diagnosis that was incompatible with life when she was pregnant with her. And I was pregnant at the same time with my oldest. And we journeyed through that together, and her dad's passing and my marriage ending. And we talk about what it's like to be a friend with somebody who's going through grief. It's a beautiful conversation. So that's exclusive to the audiobook. So you can get that on Audible or Libra FM, or you can listen to it free on Spotify or Amazon Music. So lots of different ways to access the book. And I really hope that people do and that it's helpful. And if you're somebody who's listened to this just because you enjoyed listening to conversations with women, know that this is a great book to give. That's something that I like to remind people, because so many people wanted to help me and wanted to do something and they didn't know what to do. And if somebody had given me a book like this when I was walking through my divorce and so much sorrow, it would have meant so much to me and it would have been something I could grab onto. So I think it's a really safe book for giving. And you can connect with me on Instagram. It's just Jessica N. Turner, or my website, which is jessicannturner.com. Tara, you and I were laughing before we started. JessicaTurner.com is a porn site, guys. So do not miss the N. JessicaNturner.com, and you can find my blog there, and you can find deals. You can find more information about the book or speaking if you book events. I would love to connect with you all there.
And Jessica's a phenomenal speaker. I've heard you speak twice at Mom 2.0, at least twice, maybe 3 times, definitely twice, that I remember thinking, being like, this girl's giving me chills. I have to meet her. I need to be friends with her.
Thank you. You're so kind. Well, I love that we are friends now. I've admired you for years and years. Actually, at Mom 2, I remember like longingly looking, being like, I wish I could know her. So I feel so glad
I felt like that about you. And now here we are.
And like, here we are. We've got each other's cell phones now and we're friends. I love it.
It makes me so happy.
You.
Jess, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for the work that you do, because it is so important.
Thank you, friend. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you could head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow, or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.